My brother stole my inheritance and kicked me out, but he had no idea what Dad really left me. The lawyer's office fell silent as my brother Marcus smirked at me across the mahogany table. "Pack your bags, David," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The house is mine now. Everything is mine." The other family members nodded approvingly, their faces showing the same contempt they'd worn for years. But what none of them knew, including Marcus, was that our father had prepared one final surprise that would change everything. Before I tell you what happened next, where are you watching from? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. You won't believe how the tables turned when the truth finally came out. Growing up, I was always the disappointment in the Richardson family. While my older brother Marcus excelled at everything, football captain, valedictorian, full scholarship to Harvard Business School, I struggled with dyslexia and barely made it through high school. My father, Thomas Richardson, was a self-made millionaire who built Richardson Industries from nothing, and he made it clear from early on which son he was proud of. "Marcus has the mind for business," Dad would say during family dinners, his chest swelling with pride as my brother discussed stock markets and investment strategies. "He's going to take this company to heights I never imagined." Then his eyes would shift to me, and the disappointment would cloud his features. "David, you need to find something you're good at. This family doesn't support failures." Those words stung more than any physical blow could have. I was only 16, still trying to figure out who I was, and my own father had already written me off as a failure. Marcus, sensing Dad's favoritism, made sure to exploit it at every opportunity. "Don't worry, Dad," Marcus would say with false sympathy. "I'll make sure the Richardson name means something. Not everyone in this family has to be successful." The barb was always aimed at me, and Dad never corrected him. School was a nightmare for me. The letters would swim on the page, making reading an exhausting struggle. Teachers labeled me lazy or unmotivated, not understanding that I was fighting a learning disability that wouldn't be properly diagnosed until years later. Marcus, meanwhile, breezed through advanced placement courses and collected academic awards like trophies. The breaking point came during my senior year. I had been working part-time at a local auto shop, the only place where I felt competent and valued. I discovered I had a natural talent for understanding how engines worked, how mechanical systems connected and functioned. For the first time in my life, I felt smart. When I told Dad I wanted to study automotive engineering, his reaction was swift and brutal. "Absolutely not," he said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Richardson men don't get their hands dirty. You'll study business like your brother, or you'll figure out your own way in life." "But Dad, I'm good at this," I pleaded. "Mr. Johnson at the shop says I have real talent. He thinks I could—" "I don't care what some mechanic thinks," Dad interrupted, finally looking at me with those cold, dismissive eyes. "You'll do what's expected of you, or you'll do nothing at all." That night, Marcus found me in my room, packing a duffel bag. "Running away, little brother?" he asked, leaning against my doorframe with that superior smile he'd perfected over the years. "I'm 18 now," I said, not meeting his eyes. "I can make my own decisions." "You're making a mistake," Marcus said, but there was no concern in his voice, only satisfaction. "Dad's already talking about changing his will. Keep disappointing him and you'll find yourself with nothing." "Maybe nothing is better than this," I replied, zipping up my bag. Marcus laughed. "You'll be back. People like you always come crawling back when reality hits." I walked out that night with $200, a bag of clothes, and a heart full of determination to prove them all wrong. What I didn't know was that my father was watching from his study window as I left. And the expression on his face wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. The next 10 years were the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I enrolled in community college, working full-time at the auto shop to pay my way. My boss, Frank Johnson, became the father figure I'd never had, encouraging my natural abilities and helping me see past my learning disability. "You've got something special, kid," Frank would say as he watched me diagnose complex engine problems that had stumped more experienced mechanics. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Slowly, I began to believe him. I transferred to a 4-year university, studying mechanical engineering while working nights and weekends. It took me 6 years to complete a 4-year degree, but I graduated with honors and several job offers from major automotive companies. During this time, I had minimal contact with my family. Marcus would occasionally call, usually when he needed something or wanted to gloat about his latest business success. He'd joined Dad's company immediately after Harvard and was quickly promoted to vice president, a position everyone knew he'd inherit along with everything else. "Still playing with cars, little brother?" Marcus asked during one of his rare calls. "Dad just closed the Henderson deal, $20 million, but I'm sure your oil changes are fulfilling too." I had learned not to rise to his bait. "I'm doing well, Marcus. How's Dad?" "Rich and successful, thanks to me. You could have been part of this, you know. Instead, you chose to be ordinary." What Marcus didn't know was that I wasn't ordinary at all. I had been developing revolutionary innovations in hybrid engine technology, working with a small team of brilliant engineers on projects that could transform the automotive industry. My work was gaining attention from major manufacturers, but I kept quiet about my successes, having learned long ago that sharing good news with my family only invited ridicule. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my workshop, fine-tuning a prototype engine that had attracted interest from 3 major car companies, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my cousin Sarah's number. "David," she said, her voice strained, "I'm sorry to be the one telling you this, but Uncle Thomas had a heart attack. He's in the hospital." My hand stilled on the wrench I'd been holding. Despite everything, he was still my father. "How bad is it?" "It's not good. The doctors say you should come if you want to see him." I arrived at the hospital to find the waiting room filled with family members I hadn't seen in years. The atmosphere was tense, filled with whispered conversations and worried glances. Marcus was holding court near the coffee machine, updating a small group on Dad's condition and the business implications of his illness. "The company can't function without clear leadership," Marcus was saying. "Thankfully, Dad and I have been preparing for this transition for years." When Marcus saw me, his expression shifted from concerned son to territorial predator. "Well, well, look who decided to show up." "How is he?" I asked, ignoring the hostile stares from other family members. "Critical but stable. The doctors say the next 48 hours are crucial." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I hope you're not here thinking this changes anything between you and Dad. Some bridges can't be rebuilt." Before I could respond, a doctor emerged from the ICU. "Family of Thomas Richardson?" We all gathered around as the doctor explained Dad's condition. The heart attack had been massive, requiring emergency surgery. He was stable, but would need extensive recovery time, assuming he pulled through the critical period. "Can we see him?" Marcus asked. "Immediate family only, one at a time, and only for a few minutes." Marcus went first, of course. When he emerged 20 minutes later, his face was grim. "He's awake but weak. He asked for you," he said, looking at me with surprise and something that might have been annoyance. I entered the ICU with my heart pounding. Dad looked smaller than I remembered, pale and fragile among the machines and monitors. His eyes opened when I approached the bed. "David," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came." "Of course I came, Dad. You're my father." He studied my face for a long moment. "I know I wasn't fair to you. I pushed you away because..." He paused, struggling to find words or breath. "Because you reminded me of myself before I became hard. Before I forgot what really mattered." I felt tears threatening. Dad, you don't need to. Yes, I do. His hand found mine, surprisingly strong despite his condition. I kept track of you, David. Your innovations, your patents, your work. I know what you've accomplished. This revelation stunned me. You knew? A father always knows. I am proud of you. Proud of the man you became without my help. His grip tightened. I made mistakes, son. Big mistakes. But I'm going to fix them. Before I could ask what he meant, the machines around his bed began beeping urgently. Nurses rushed in, gently but firmly escorting me out as they worked to stabilize him. Dad survived that crisis and several others over the following weeks. I stayed in town, splitting time between the hospital and a local hotel, much to Marcus's obvious displeasure. During Dad's recovery, I began to see a different side of him. Vulnerable, reflective, and genuinely interested in my life and work. Tell me about this hybrid technology you've developed, he said during one of our conversations. His color had returned somewhat, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. I explained my innovations, expecting the familiar glazed look of disinterest or dismissal. Instead, Dad listened intently, asking intelligent questions and making observations that showed he understood the business implications of my work. You've created something revolutionary, he said finally. Something that could change everything, and you did it on your own, without anyone's help or belief. He paused, looking out the hospital window. I robbed you of support when you needed it most, but somehow you succeeded anyway. That takes a strength I'm not sure I ever had. These conversations continued throughout his recovery. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had a relationship with my father. Not the relationship I'd wanted as a child, but something real and meaningful, nonetheless. Marcus, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated by the time Dad and I were spending together. He would arrive for visits with business documents, trying to redirect Dad's attention to company matters. The Peterson contract needs your signature, Marcus would say, spreading papers across Dad's hospital tray. And the board is asking about succession planning. We can't keep them waiting indefinitely. The business will wait, Dad would reply, gently pushing the documents aside. Right now, I'm more interested in getting to know my son. I could see the frustration and fear in Marcus's eyes. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the center of Dad's attention, and it was clearly eating at him. After 6 weeks in the hospital, Dad was released to continue his recovery at home. I had planned to return to my work and my life, but Dad asked me to stay longer. I'd like you to see the business, he said. Not to pressure you into anything, but so you understand what your grandfather and I built. Marcus was furious when Dad announced his intention to give me a tour of Richardson Industries. This is ridiculous, Dad. David has no interest in the business. He made that clear years ago. People change, Marcus. Circumstances change. Your brother has proven himself in ways I never expected. The tour was revealing. Richardson Industries was impressive, a sprawling operation with multiple divisions and hundreds of employees. But I could see inefficiencies and missed opportunities, areas where my technical background gave me insights that seemed to escape Marcus. You're thinking like an engineer, Dad observed as I pointed out potential improvements in their manufacturing processes. That's exactly what this company needs. That evening, Dad called both Marcus and me into his study. I've been doing a lot of thinking during my recovery, he began, about the business, about family, about legacy. Marcus leaned forward eagerly. I've been thinking about that too, Dad. I have some ideas about expansion. Let me finish. Dad interrupted gently but firmly. I've decided to make some changes to my will and to the company structure. The room went silent. Marcus's face had gone pale. David, Dad continued, looking at me, I know you have your own career, your own innovations to pursue. But I'd like to offer you a position here As head of our new technology development division, we need someone with your vision and technical expertise. I was stunned. After years of rejection, Dad was offering me a place in the family business, not as Marcus's subordinate, but as an equal partner. And Marcus, Dad said, turning to my brother, you'll continue as president of operations. The company needs both of your skills. Marcus's relief was visible, but I could see the resentment burning in his eyes. He'd expected to inherit everything outright, and now he was being asked to share. Of course, Dad, Marcus said, his voice carefully controlled. Whatever you think is best. I asked for time to consider the offer. My work on hybrid technology was at a crucial stage, and I had commitments to my current partners, but the idea of working with Dad, of finally being accepted as part of the family legacy, was incredibly appealing. Over the following weeks, Dad and I worked together to outline what my role at Richardson Industries might look like. His enthusiasm for my ideas was genuine, and I began to see how my innovations could be applied not just to automotive manufacturing, but to the various industries Richardson served. Marcus, meanwhile, grew increasingly hostile. He made pointed comments about my lack of business experience, questioned my commitment to the family company, and repeatedly reminded Dad of my past betrayal. He left once before, Dad, Marcus said during a family dinner at the house. What's to stop him from leaving again when things get difficult? That's enough, Marcus, Dad said sharply. David has proven his character and his capabilities. I won't have you undermining him. The tension between my brother and me reached a breaking point one evening when I found Marcus in Dad's study, going through financial documents. Looking for something? I asked from the doorway. Marcus didn't look up, just reviewing the quarterly reports. Someone has to keep track of the real business while you and Dad play with your engineering fantasies. Those engineering fantasies could revolutionize how this company operates. Or they could waste millions of dollars on unproven technology. Marcus finally looked at me, his expression cold. You've been back for 2 months, David. 2 months. I've spent 15 years building this company with Dad. Don't think that some deathbed reconciliation changes anything. Is that what you think this is? A deathbed reconciliation? Isn't it? Marcus stood facing me directly. Dad feels guilty about how he treated you, so he's trying to assuage his conscience by giving you things you haven't earned. But guilt fades, little brother. And when it does, you'll be back where you started, on the outside looking in. I left that conversation feeling unsettled. Was Marcus right? Was Dad's newfound interest in me just guilt-driven? The doubt gnawed at me, especially when I noticed Dad seemed tired more often, occasionally struggling to catch his breath during our planning sessions. 3 months after Dad's heart attack, just as I was preparing to accept his offer and join Richardson Industries, he suffered a second, more massive heart attack at home. Marcus found him collapsed in his study at 6 a.m. and called 911, but it was too late. Thomas Richardson was pronounced dead at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning in June. The funeral was a grand affair, befitting a man of Dad's stature in the community. Business leaders, politicians, and hundreds of employees filled the church. I sat in the front pew with the family, still processing the shock of losing him just as we'd begun to rebuild our relationship. Marcus delivered a moving eulogy, painting a picture of a devoted father and visionary businessman. He spoke eloquently about Dad's legacy and his own commitment to carrying on the Richardson tradition. There was no mention of me or the plans Dad and I had been making. After the service, as people gathered for the reception, I overheard conversations that made it clear what everyone expected. Marcus was the heir apparent, the natural successor to Dad's empire. I was the prodigal son who'd returned too late to matter. It's a shame about David, I heard one of Dad's business associates say to another. Thomas was trying to find a place for him in the company, but really, What could someone with no business experience contribute? Marcus will do fine on his own, the other replied. He's been running things for years anyway. The reading of the will was scheduled for the following Monday at the offices of Dad's attorney, James Morrison. Marcus had been uncharacteristically solicitous in the days following the funeral, perhaps feeling guilty about our last conversation, or maybe just relieved that Dad's death had resolved the succession question in his favor. I know Dad was making promises to you about the business, Marcus said as we left the funeral home. But you have to understand, there are legal and practical complications to bringing in someone without experience. The board would never accept it. I nodded non-committally. The truth was, I was grieving too deeply to think clearly about business matters. I'd lost my father just as I'd found him again, and the pain was overwhelming. Monday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood as I drove to Morrison's office. The waiting room was filled with family members, Marcus, our aunts and uncles, several cousins, and key business associates. The atmosphere was subdued, but expectant. Marcus sat confidently in the center of the group, fielding condolences and discussing transition plans with Dad's business partners. He acknowledged me with a brief nod when I arrived, but quickly returned to his conversations. Given the circumstances, Marcus was saying to the company's CFO, I think it's important we move quickly to ensure stability. The board meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, and I'd like to have everything formalized by then. James Morrison entered promptly at 9 a.m., carrying a thick manila folder and wearing the grave expression appropriate for such occasions. Thank you all for coming, he said, taking his seat at the head of the conference table. Thomas left very specific instructions about how this meeting should be conducted. He opened the folder and withdrew several documents. I should mention that Thomas updated his will quite recently, just 6 weeks ago. He was very particular about the timing and circumstances of these revisions. Marcus shifted slightly in his seat, but his confidence remained intact. 6 weeks ago was well into Dad's recovery, when Marcus had been handling most business decisions. Let me begin with the personal bequests, Morrison continued, reading from the document. To his sister Patricia, Thomas leaves his collection of first edition books and the sum of $50,000. To his brother William, he leaves his vintage car collection and $50,000. He continued through a list of smaller bequests to various family members and longtime employees. Then he reached the significant provisions. To his son Marcus Richardson, Thomas leaves the family home and all its contents, his personal investment portfolio valued at approximately $2 million, and a position on the board of directors of Richardson Industries. Marcus nodded with satisfaction, though I could see he was waiting for the bigger announcement. The real inheritance, the company itself. Morrison paused, looking around the room. The remainder of Thomas Richardson's estate, including his controlling interest in Richardson Industries and all associated assets, valued at approximately $47 million, he leaves to his son, David Richardson. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Marcus half rose from his chair, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. That's impossible, Marcus said, his voice shaking. There has to be a mistake, Morrison continued calmly. Thomas also left specific instructions for David regarding the management of Richardson Industries. David is to assume the position of CEO immediately, with full authority to restructure the company as he sees fit. I sat in stunned silence, unable to process what I was hearing. Around the table, family members were whispering urgently among themselves, shooting glances between Marcus and me. This is insane, Marcus said, now standing fully. David knows nothing about running a company. Dad couldn't have been in his right mind. I can assure you, Morrison said firmly, that Thomas was completely lucid when he made these changes. In fact, he anticipated there might be questions about his mental state. He reached into his folder and withdrew a sealed envelope. He left this letter to be read in the event of any challenges to his will. Morrison opened the envelope and began to read. If you're hearing this letter, it means someone is questioning my judgment and leaving the majority of my estate to David. Let me be clear. This decision was made with complete awareness and careful consideration. For years, I believed that business success was the only measure of a man's worth. I was wrong. I pushed away a son who had the courage to follow his own path, to build something meaningful with his own hands and mind. Meanwhile, I enabled another son's sense of entitlement without recognizing his fundamental character flaws. Marcus, you have worked for Richardson Industries for 15 years, but you have never truly understood what built this company. You see only the profit, the prestige, the power. You've never understood that business is about creating value, solving problems, making people's lives better. David left with nothing and built something extraordinary. His innovations in hybrid technology represent the future of manufacturing, the kind of forward-thinking vision that Richardson Industries needs to survive and thrive in the coming decades. More importantly, David has shown integrity, perseverance, and humility, qualities that Marcus has never developed. I've watched Marcus take credit for others' work, blame subordinates for his mistakes, and treat employees as disposable resources. These are not the qualities of a leader worth following. My decision isn't just about correcting past mistakes, though I have many to correct. It's about ensuring that Richardson Industries continues to be a company that creates value and treats people with dignity. David has proven he can do that. Marcus has proven he cannot. To David, I know this is a tremendous responsibility, and I know you may not want it. If you choose to sell the company, that's your right. But I hope you'll consider using your vision and values to transform Richardson Industries into something even greater than what your grandfather and I built. To Marcus, you're receiving enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. What you do with it will reveal whether you learned anything from our years together, or whether my fears about your character were justified. This is my final decision, made with complete confidence in David's abilities and complete clarity about what's best for the company and everyone it employs. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sat down heavily, his face cycling through emotions: shock, rage, humiliation, and something that might have been despair. Morrison continued with the technical details of the inheritance, but I barely heard him. I was still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Dad hadn't just given me an opportunity. He'd entrusted me with his life's work, with the livelihoods of hundreds of employees, with a legacy that spanned 3 generations. After the meeting, as family members filed out in stunned silence, Marcus approached me. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by raw hurt and anger. "You planned this," he said, his voice low and accusatory. "You manipulated him while he was vulnerable." "Marcus, I had no idea. Don't lie to me." His voice rose, causing the few remaining people to turn and stare. "You came back here playing the loving son, working on his guilt, poisoning him against me. That's not what happened, isn't it?" Marcus stepped closer, his face flushed with anger. "You were nobody, David. A failed mechanic living in some pathetic apartment going nowhere. And now suddenly, you're the golden boy, the heir to everything I worked 15 years to build." I felt my own anger rising. "You mean everything you felt entitled to inherit? When did you ever actually build anything, Marcus? When did you create value instead of just managing what was already there?" "I gave my life to this company," Marcus shouted. "I sacrificed everything for Richardson Industries while you were off playing with your toys." "You never sacrificed anything," I replied, my voice steady despite my anger. "You took the easy path, the path that was laid out for you. You never had to prove yourself, never had to struggle, never had to create something from nothing." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something break behind his eyes. "This isn't over," he said finally. "I'll contest the will. I'll prove Dad wasn't competent to make this decision. You can try, I said quietly. But we both know the truth, Marcus. Dad saw who we really are, and he made his choice accordingly. Marcus left without another word. I sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, trying to absorb the magnitude of the change in my life. James Morrison returned, carrying additional documents. Your father left these for you, he said, handing me a sealed folder. Instructions for the transition, insights about the business, recommendations for key personnel. He spent considerable time preparing for this moment. That evening, in the hotel room that had been my temporary home for months, I opened Dad's folder. Inside, detailed analyses of Richardson Industries' operations, assessments of key employees, strategic recommendations for the future, and a personal letter addressed to me. David, the letter began, if you are reading this, then I'm gone and you're facing the biggest challenge of your life. I wish I could be there to help you navigate it, but I believe you have everything you need to succeed. Richardson Industries is a good company with good people, but it's become complacent. Marcus never understood that business isn't just about maintaining what exists. It's about constantly evolving, constantly improving, constantly finding new ways to create value. Your technical expertise, combined with your understanding of what it means to build something from scratch, makes you uniquely qualified to lead this evolution. The company needs innovation, and more importantly, it needs a leader who understands that success comes from empowering others, not from controlling them. I know you didn't ask for this responsibility, and I know it means putting your own work on hold. But I believe you can transform Richardson Industries into something much more significant than what it is today, a company that doesn't just make money, but makes a difference. The path ahead won't be easy. You'll face resistance from some board members, skepticism from employees, and certainly opposition from Marcus. But remember that you've already overcome greater challenges with fewer resources. You have something Marcus never developed: the strength that comes from being tested, from failing and getting back up, from creating something meaningful with your own efforts. Trust your instincts, surround yourself with good people, and never forget that the best leaders are those who serve others rather than expecting to be served. I'm proud of the man you've become, and I'm confident in the leader you'll become. Make Richardson Industries worthy of the Richardson name, not the name as it exists today, but the name as it could be. With love and confidence in your future success, Dad. I sat in that hotel room until well past midnight, reading and rereading Dad's letter, studying his business analyses, and trying to wrap my mind around the magnitude of the opportunity and responsibility I'd inherited. The next morning, I drove to Richardson Industries headquarters, a modern glass and steel building that housed over 300 employees. Walking into the executive offices, I was struck by how foreign everything felt. These people had been working here for years, many for decades. They had established relationships, proven systems, comfortable routines, and now I was supposed to lead them. The company's senior management team was waiting in the main conference room. The CFO, the head of operations, the marketing director, and several other key executives. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and barely concealed concern. I know this transition comes as a surprise to all of you, I began, taking my seat at the head of the table where Dad had sat for so many years. It comes as a surprise to me too, but I want you to know that I don't take this responsibility lightly. The CFO, Robert Chen, spoke first. With all due respect, David, we're concerned about continuity. Richardson Industries has been growing steadily under Marcus's leadership. Our employees and clients need stability. I agree completely, I replied, but stability doesn't mean stagnation. My father left this company to me not to maintain the status quo, but to help it evolve and grow. Over the following hours, I listened to their concerns, their assessments of the company's strengths and weaknesses, their thoughts about future challenges and opportunities. What emerged was a picture of a fundamentally sound company that had become risk-averse and conservative under Marcus's leadership. "We have good relationships with our existing clients," the marketing director explained, "but we haven't developed any new major accounts in over 2 years. Marcus preferred to focus on maximizing profits from existing contracts rather than pursuing growth opportunities." This approach had generated steady profits, but had left Richardson Industries vulnerable to competitive pressures and changing market conditions. The company was profitable, but not innovative, stable, but not dynamic. "What if I told you," I said, "that I have technology that could revolutionize how we approach manufacturing? Technology that could make our processes more efficient, our products more competitive, and our services more valuable to clients?" I spent the next hour outlining my hybrid technology innovations and explaining how they could be integrated into Richardson Industries' operations. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. These were smart, experienced professionals who recognized genuine innovation when they saw it. "This could change everything," Robert Chen said, studying the technical specifications I'd shared. "If we could offer clients manufacturing processes that are 30% more efficient and significantly more environmentally friendly, we'd have a competitive advantage that could transform our market position." By the end of that first day, I had a clearer vision of what Richardson Industries could become and a team of senior managers who were excited about the possibilities. But I also knew that the real challenges lay ahead. Marcus, true to his word, filed a legal challenge to Dad's will within a week of the reading. He hired an expensive law firm and began gathering evidence to support his claim that Dad had been mentally incompetent when he made the changes to his will. The legal battle was ugly and public. Marcus gave interviews to local business publications, portraying himself as the victim of a manipulative younger brother who had taken advantage of their father's illness. He painted me as an opportunist who had no real qualifications to run a major company. "David Richardson has never managed so much as a convenience store," Marcus told the Business Journal in a lengthy interview. "Now he's supposed to be running a company with 300 employees and $47 million in assets? It's absurd, and it's dangerous for everyone who depends on Richardson Industries for their livelihood." The article stung, particularly because some of Marcus's points weren't entirely wrong. I didn't have traditional business management experience. I had never run a large organization or been responsible for hundreds of jobs. But I also knew that Dad hadn't made his decision lightly, and I was determined to prove that his faith in me was justified. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, creating uncertainty for employees and clients. Some key personnel left for other opportunities rather than wait to see how the dispute would be resolved. A few major clients delayed signing new contracts, concerned about the company's stability. During this period, I focused on learning every aspect of the business and building relationships with employees at all levels. I spent time in the manufacturing facilities, talking with workers about their processes and challenges. I met with clients to understand their needs and concerns. I studied financial reports and market analyses until I could recite them from memory. What I discovered was a company with tremendous potential that had been held back by conservative leadership and lack of innovation. The workforce was skilled and dedicated, the facilities were well maintained, and the client relationships were solid. What was missing was vision and the willingness to take calculated risks for growth. 6 months after Dad's death, James Morrison called with news about the legal challenge. "Marcus's attorneys are requesting a settlement conference," he told me. "They're not confident they can prove mental incompetence, but they're hoping to negotiate a larger share of the inheritance." "What do you think?" I asked. "I think your father's will is rock solid," Morrison replied. "He anticipated this challenge and took steps to ensure his mental competence was well documented. But litigation is expensive and time-consuming, and it's clearly affecting the business. I agreed to the settlement conference, not because I doubted Dad's will, but because I wanted to end the uncertainty that was hurting Richardson Industries. We met in a neutral conference room with Marcus, his attorneys, Morrison, and a mediator. Marcus looked haggard. The stress of the legal battle, combined with the public nature of the dispute, had taken its toll. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I'm prepared to offer Marcus an additional $5 million and a guaranteed position as president of operations, I said when the mediator asked for opening positions. In exchange, he drops all legal challenges and commits to working constructively within the company's structure, Marcus's lead attorney whispered in his ear before responding. My client is prepared to accept $15 million and the position of co-CEO, with equal authority in company decisions. The negotiations continued for hours. Marcus wanted more money and more control than I was willing to give. But as the day wore on, I could see his resolve weakening. The legal fees were mounting, his chances of overturning the will were slim, and the public dispute was damaging his reputation in the business community. Finally, we reached an agreement. Marcus would receive an additional $3 million and would retain a position on the board of directors with input on major strategic decisions. In exchange, he would drop all legal challenges and publicly support the transition of leadership. I want you to know, Marcus said as we were signing the agreement, that I still think this is a mistake. But I'm tired of fighting, and the company needs stability. I understand, I replied, and I want you to know that despite everything, you're still my brother. There's a place for you at Richardson Industries if you want it. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. Maybe someday, he said, but not now. I need some time to figure out who I am if I'm not the heir to Dad's empire. With the legal challenge resolved, I could finally focus completely on running Richardson Industries. The first major decision was how to implement my hybrid technology innovations. Rather than rushing into wholesale changes, I decided to start with a pilot program in one of our smaller manufacturing facilities. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The hybrid systems reduced energy consumption by 35%, increased production efficiency by 28%, and significantly reduced waste and emissions. More importantly, the workers embraced the new technology, finding it easier to use and more reliable than the older systems. Word of our success spread quickly through industry networks. Within 6 months, we had inquiries from companies across the country wanting to implement our hybrid technology in their facilities. Richardson Industries went from being a solid but unremarkable company to being recognized as an industry leader in sustainable manufacturing innovation. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was cultural. I implemented profit-sharing programs for employees, invested in training and development, and created an environment where innovation was encouraged at every level. The company that had once been run with an iron fist became a place where people felt valued and empowered. 2 years after taking over, Richardson Industries had doubled its revenue and tripled its profit margins. We'd won several industry awards for innovation and sustainability, and we were being courted by major corporations wanting to acquire our technology or partner with us. But the real victory came when Marcus called me one evening. "I've been following what you've done with the company," he said, his voice different from the bitter tone I'd grown accustomed to. "Dad was right about you. I can see that now." "Marcus, no, let me finish. I spent so many years thinking I was entitled to success because of who I was, not because of what I could do. You earned everything you have. You took a company I was running into the ground and turned it into something extraordinary." There was a pause before he continued. "I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I became so bitter, so entitled. I think I'd like to take you up on that offer to come back to Richardson Industries. Not as your equal, but as someone who's ready to learn." Today, Richardson Industries employs over 800 people and has manufacturing facilities in 4 states. Our hybrid technology has been licensed to companies around the world, and we're working on innovations that could revolutionize entire industries. Marcus rejoined the company 6 months ago as head of business development. He's shown a humility and work ethic that I never saw in him before. We're not just brothers now, we're genuine partners, each contributing our strengths to the family legacy. The lawyer's office where this all began now seems like a different lifetime. That day, when Marcus smirked and told me to pack my bags, neither of us could have imagined how completely the tables would turn. But Dad had seen something in both of us that we couldn't see in ourselves. He saw that I had the strength to lead and that Marcus had the capacity to change. The inscription on Dad's grave reads, Thomas Richardson, visionary, father, teacher. He taught us both, in the end. He taught me that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or property, but the opportunity to prove what you're truly capable of. And he taught Marcus that entitlement is a prison that only humility can unlock. As I sign contracts and make decisions that affect hundreds of families, I often think about that scared 18-year-old who walked out of his father's house with nothing but determination and $200. I think about Frank Johnson, who believed in me when no one else would. And I think about Dad, who found a way to give me everything I needed, even after he was gone. The Richardson legacy isn't just about business success. It's about second chances, about the power of perseverance, and about the truth that real inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you make of what you're given. And sometimes, the son who seems to have nothing ends up with everything that truly matters.